We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Chesam and Aleph in Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 78a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that Rabbi Yehuda has to say that Egyptians who are women, Mitzrayim that are women, are included in the prohibition, where it says that the first two generations of Egyptian converts are not allowed to marry into the Kahal. Because if we said that women are not included, so then Rabbi Yehuda would say that the Kahal Geirim is considered a Kahal, and it would be prohibited for a Mitzri Sheni, a male Mitzri, to marry the Mitzris, and therefore how would they ever purify themselves, as the Gemara now says, Mitzri Sheni b'ma yitar. If you're going to say that women are not included, the Mitzri women are not included, so how does a second generation Mitzri purify his family? Who does he marry in order to have a third generation Mitzri that would be allowed to marry into the community? And so the Gemara says, Dilma, maybe Diyavar v'nasiv, maybe the pasuk just means if the Mitzri transgresses and marries someone and has a child, the third generation will be permitted. Rashi over here says, Diyavar v'nasiv, o bas Yisrael, o giores. In other words, he'll transgress. He'll marry a bas Yisrael, he'll marry a giores. In that situation, that's what the pasuk is talking about. But the Gemara continues, Di'i loch sivkra. It's not going to say in the pasuk a solution that would only be if the person transgresses. As Rashi over here says, Di lo kasav kra, midi da'al yedei avera ka'asi. Pasuk is not going to say that if the person transgresses and doesn't avera, then the third generation is going to be permitted. Lo kasav kra lememar bonim asher yivoldu. It's not going to say bonim asher yivoldu to this not permissible marriage, because that's not going to be common that it's ever going to come to this third generation. But the Gemara says, 1 second, Hare Mamzer, what about the case of Mamzer? Di'i v'kosvei kra, that's the case of Di'i, and the pasuk writes it, as Rashi over here says, Hare Mamzer, Di'u lo have Mamzer ela al yedei avera. A person can only become a Mamzer through an avera. Shebo aviv al chayvei krisos, the father was in a relationship with someone where there's a chiv kares. V'kosvei kra lo yavo Mamzer, and the pasuk says, the Mamzer cannot enter into the call. V'avagav de lo shchiach, even though it's not common. It's darech kra l'michtavei, the pasuk needs to write it. Because the point is, if it should happen, the person should not, we shouldn't allow this person to marry into the community. And so the Gemara says, Di'i li'isura kasav. If you have a situation of a di'i, which is for a prohibition, that the pasuk would write. Di'i l'hatera lo kasav. But to write a di'i, which is to try to permit, like over here, the third generation mitzri, that we would not write. But the Gemara continues, Hare machzer grushaso. What about the case of machzer grushaso? Di'i lehetera, that's a case of di'i lehetera. The kasve in that case is written, Rashi over here says, Hare machzer grushaso mishenisis la'acher. Let's say she divorces, they get a divorce, and then she marries someone else, so she's not supposed to marry her original husband. Di'ihu v'kasav kra later. It's a di'i, and the pasuk says that if it should happen and they should remarry, there's a heter over there. Dechsiv ki toeva hi v'darshinan hi toeva ve'in boneh toav. And we say that she is the abomination, but if she should marry him and do that, then the children would still be okay. They would not be toavin, and so there you have a di'i lehetera. And so the Gemara says, Hasam over there, Mishum Ikar Isura Hu Dekasve. There, the real reason it's being written is for the main Isur, meaning that she is a Toeva, and then we learn by implication about the children. Rashi says, Hasam Mishum Ikar Isura Kasve Lashminan Di'i Miha Toeva Havo. The point is to teach that she is Toeva. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Im Nemar Bonim Loma Nemar Doros, Vim Nemar Doros Loma Nemar Bonim. If it says in the pasuk Bonim, why does it say Doros? And if it says in the pasuk Doros, why does it say Bonim? Gemara is referring to the pasuk which says, Bonim asher yivoldu lahem dor shlishi, yavo lahem bekal Hashem. It says the children that are born in the third generation, talking about the Mitzri converts, so the third generation can enter the community. So it says Bonim, and it says dor shlishi. Why does it need to say both? And so the Braisa continues, Im nemar bonim velo nemar doros. If it just said bonim without the word doros, hayisi omer, I might think that ben rishon v'sheni aser shlishi mutter, that the pasuk means to say, let's say this Mitzri has a first and a second son, those children would be aser, but his third son would be mutter. I would have no idea that it has to do with generations, as Rashi over here says, ben rishon v'sheni ger Mitzri shenol dulo shlosha bonim. Let's say he has 3 kids. La'achar sheniskayer ha ben harishon v'sheni yeyasru. After he converts, so the first son and the second son will be aser. Vashlishi mutter, but the third son that he has after he converts, that son is going to be mutter. That's what I would have thought the pasuk means. Lakach nemar doros. For that reason, that's why it says doros, to indicate that it's generations. Rashi says Lakach nemar doros lashmina the chol bon of asurim. All of his children are aser. Uvnei bonim mutarim, and the point is that the grandchildren are going to be mutter. And the Brisa continues, Vim nemar doros v'lo nemar bonim. If it said doros without bonim, hayisi yomer, I would say los and omdim al har Sinai, that we're talking to those who are standing, and har Sinai, that's when you start counting the 3 generations. And Rashi over here explains, Vim nemar dor shlishi v'lo nemar bonim. If it said dor shlishi without bonim, hayisi yomer laosam Yisraelim ha'omdim al har Sinai hu omer. I would think that the pasuk is talking to those Jews who are at har Sinai, and it's saying dor shlishi shalachem, your 3rd generation, yavo lahem bekal kolomar bochem Asur and Mitzri v'Adomi, meaning to say you and your children cannot marry a Mitzri and Adomi. Avol b'vnei bonim mutarim, but your grandchildren can marry Mitzri and Adomi. Umisham v'holim mutar Mitzriyim afilu ger rishon. And I would think that from then onward, even if it's a ger rishon, a 1st generation convert of a Mitzri, it would be permitted. That's what I would have thought it would meant. Lekach nemar bonim. That's why it says the word bonim. And then the pasuk over there says the word lahem twice. It says bonim asher yivoldu lahem dor shlishi yavo lahem b'kal Hashem. And so the Brisa says lahem. What does it mean lahem? It means mehem minei. You count from them, meaning from the 1st convert. Rashi over here says mehem minei hu rishon, meaning he the convert, the Mitzri convert is the 1st generation. Beno sheni, his son is the 2nd. Uven beno mutter, and then his grandson is the 3rd generation and his mutter. That's what the first lahem teaches. And the 2nd lahem holach achar psulan. The 2nd lahem teaches that you should follow after the parent who is puzzle. As Rashi over here says, lahem holach achar psulan, trei lahem ksivi, like we said, there are 2 lahems. Umashma holach achareim dim nitmu b'ksherim. Let's say you had a situation where the Mitzri married someone kosher. Could go in Mitzri shenasa Yisraelis, for example, a Mitzri married a Yisraelis, or v'Yisrael shenasa Mitzris, or Yisrael married a Mitzris. Holach achareim, you have to follow the Mitzri side of the marriage. V'havlad puzzle ador shlishi, and the child will be puzzle until you reach the 3rd generation. That's what that lahem teaches us. And the Gemara continues, V'tzarech lemichtav lahem, the pasuk needs to write the word lahem. V'tzarech lemichtav asher yivoldu, and the pasuk also needs to write asher yivoldu. The Gemara says, Dikas of Rachman asher yivoldu, because if it just said asher yivoldu, hava mino mi b'neihem minei, I might think that you start the count of the generations from their children. So kasav Rachman lahem, that's why the pasuk says lahem, to start the count from them, from the person who converted 1st generation. Because of Rachman lahem, and if the pasuk only had lahem, hava mina, then I might think mitzris mu'uberis, let's say you have a mitzvah that's pregnant, shenisgairin, she converts, so he uvenachad, maybe she and her son are considered 1 generation. Kasav Rachmana asher yivoldu. That's why the pasuk says asher yivoldu, to say no, the son is considered the 2nd generation. And the Gemara continues, Vitzterich lemichtav lahem hacha, it needs to write the word lahem over here by the Mitzri. Vitzterich lemichtav lo gavi mamzer, and it also needs to write the word lo by mamzer. Because of Rachmana hacha, because if the pasuk only wrote it over here, mishum deva mi tipa psula, because this is a situation of a tipa psula, meaning to say it's a non-Jew. Aval mamzer deba mi tipa kshera, but a mamzer who actually comes from a tipa kshera, comes from a Jew, aimalo, I would say that's not the case. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Because of Rachmana gave mamzer, and if I only wrote it by mamzer, mishum dein roy lavo bekali olam, because the mamzer can never enter the community forever. Aval hacha, but over here, aimalo, I would say not that way. So tzricha, that's why both psukim are needed. Rashi over here says, lo gabe mamzer lemeimra holach achar psula. What it means is, by a mamzer it says the word lo, similar to how it says lahem by the Mitzri, to say that you follow the psul, meaning to say, shem nasa kashera beno mamzer. Let's say a mamzer marries a kshera, the son follows the psul, and the son is a mamzer. And that's why you needed to say both, because min tipa kashera, when it comes to a mamzer, it comes from a tipa kashera, mi Yisrael tar, meaning it's a Yisrael tar, it's not coming from somebody who was not Jewish like a Mitzri. And we will just note over here, the pasuk by mamzer is lo yavo mamzer bekal Hashem, gam dor asiri lo yavo lo bekal Hashem. It uses the word lo, even the 10th generation cannot enter into the community, similar to the yavo lahem by the Mitzri, and we're saying it's the same halacha, that you always follow the pasuk. Let's say you have a situation of a marriage between a kosher and a pasuk, the child will follow the pasuk both by the case of the Mitzri and by the case of mamzer. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabba bar Barchan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Barchan says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzri Sheni Shenosa Mitzris Rishona. Let's say you have a Mitzri Sheni, and he marries a Mitzris who's 1st generation. So what's the halacha with the child? Beno Shlishi Havoy. That the son is considered to be a 3rd generation, meaning to say, Alma, we see, Kosavar Basar Didei Shadinan Le. We see that we follow the father, we follow him according to this statement of Rabbi Yochanan. So Mesav Rav Yosef asks the following question. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, it says that Rabbi Tarfon says, Yecholin mamzerim litar, there's a way that mamzerim can purify their lineage and marry into the community. Keitzad how? So mamzer nosa shifcha, what can happen is the mamzer can marry a shifcha, meaning to say a shifcha kanan is a maidservant. Havlad eved, then the child becomes an eved. Then shicharo, then he frees the eved, and nimtza ben chorin, now it comes out the child is a regular ben chorin. But the Gemara says, Alma Basar Didasha Dinale. Don't we see from this case that we follow her because the child becomes an Eved, the child does not become a Mamzer. And so the Gemara answers, Shani Hasam, no, it's different over there when you're talking about a Shifcha. The Yomar Kra, because the Pasuk already says, Ho'isha vilodeh tial adoneh, that the woman and her children belong to the master, meaning in that case, the children follow the mother. And the Gemara continues, Mesav Rava. Rava asks a question. Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, Minyamin ger mitzri hayali chaver mitalmidei Rabbi Akiva. Minyamin was a ger mitzri. He was a mitzri convert. He was a friend of mine from the students of Rabbi Akiva. V'yamar, and he said as follows: Ani mitzri rishon. I'm a mitzri first generation. V'nasasi mitzris rishon. I'm going to marry a mitzris first generation. Asi livni mitzris sheniya. I'm going to have my son marry a second generation mitzris. Kedei sheyeh ben b'ni roi lava b'kol. That way, my grandson will be a third generation, and he will be able to enter the community. And so the Gemara says, Visal Kadaitach. Now, if you think Basrei Dideisha Dinonle, that we follow the father and not the mother, so Afilu Rishona Nami, so his son could marry even a Mitzvah Rishona. Why does he say, I'm going to marry my son off to a Mitzvah Shaniya? We're going to follow the father anyway, and the father in that case is a Shaniya, so the son, the grandson, would be Shlishis. And so the Gemara says, Ha'amar le Rabbi Yochanan l'Tana. No, Rabbi Yochanan already said to the Tana, Tani Rishona, that you should change the text of that brisa. It wasn't saying I'm going to marry my son off to a mitzvah sheniya. Really, it should say that he was going to marry his son off, even if it was a mitzvah rishona. And the Gemara continues, Kiyasar Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Rav Dimi came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan a different version of what Rabbi Yochanan said in this regard. Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzris Rishona. That on the contrary, if a Mitzri Sheni marries a Mitzris Rishona, Bina Sheni Havoy, the son will actually be considered second generation. Alma Basar Ime Shadinan Lane. You see from this that he follows his mother. He does not follow his father. So Amar le Abaya. So then Abaya said back to Rav Dimi, Elohadam Rabbi Yochanan. But how does that fit with what Rabbi Yochanan said over here? By Hivrish Chatos Muberis. Let's say a person separates a carbon chatos, and the animal that he separates for the chatos is pregnant. V'yolda, and then she gives birth. So he said, this is what Rabbi Yochanan said, Rotza mischaper ba, Rotza mischaper bevald. If the person wants, he can bring her as the carbon. He can use the mother animal as the carbon. And if he wants, he can use the child. Both would be good. And so now the Gemara says, if you're going to say correctly that the fetus is not considered like the thigh of its mother, meaning it's not considered part of the mother, but it's independent. So this would be an identical case. Let's say a person separates two animals as a carbon chatos for achrayas purposes. In other words, he only needs to bring one carbon chatos, but he designates two animals in case one gets lost or whatever happens. He'll have another one to be able to bring as his carbon chatos. That would be the same over here. Here you would say uber lav yerechimo. So there's two animals. There's the mother and the fetus that are separate, and it's like separating two carbon chatoses for achrayas. V'yamar Rav Oshia, and Rav Oshia says hivre shtei chatos lachrayas. The halach is that if you separate two chatos for the achrayas purposes, mischaper biachas mehen. So then you can do a kapara. You bring one as the carbon, v'ashniya tira, and the other one you allow it to graze. You allow it to develop a mum. But if you're going to say that the uber is a part of the mother, it's yerech imo, so then have a vlad chatos, then the baby would actually be considered what's called a vlad chatos, the child of a carbon chatos. Vlad chatos lemisa azal. The halach is that a vlad chatos must be left to die, and you're not allowed to bring it as a carbon. So in any case, what does it seem like from here? It seems like from here that Rabbi Yochanan holds uber lav yerech imo, who it doesn't follow the mother, and also over here when it comes to the mitzri sheni and the mitzris rishona, it should not follow the mother. So how could Rav Dimi say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it follows the mother? And so the Gemara says Ishtik, so he was quiet. He didn't have an answer for this question. So then Amar Lei, so then he said to him, Dil Mashani Hasam. No, maybe it's different over there. Techsiv Asher Yivoldu, because the pasuk actually says those who were born. By Mitzri it talks about those who are born. Hakasav Telo Beleda. The pasuk is making it dependent on the birth, and so maybe that's what Rabbi Yochanan meant, that it's following the mother, because the pasuk says Asher Yivoldu. It indicates that we should follow the mother specifically in this case. And so the Gemara says Amar Lei. So Rav Avdimi said to Abaya Karkafna, which literally means man of great skull. Rashi says it means important person. He's calling Abaya an important person. Chazise l'reishach beinei amudei ki amar Rabbi Yochanan lahashmaita. It's as if I've seen your head between the pillars of the Beis Medrash when Rabbi Yochanan said over the sugya. In other words, exactly what you're saying is pshat in Rabbi Yochanan. It's as if you were in the Beis Medrash. That actually is the pshat in what Rabbi Yochanan said. But the Gemara continues, Talmud dechsiv asher yivoldu. The only reason why we say that we're following the mother over here by the case of the Mitzri is because of the pasuk. It says asher yivoldu. Habialma basar avua shadinale. But it sounds like in general, if there wouldn't be a pasuk, we would follow the father. So according to that, Elahadam Rava. But what about that which Rava said? He said nachris me'uberish and isgairu. Let's say you have a nachris. Let's say you have a non-Jewish woman. She's pregnant and she converts. Bina ein sarach tvila. He said that her son does not require immersion. It's already when he's born, he's considered Jewish. And so the Gemara asks if in general we follow the father, Amayin Tzarech Tvila, so why doesn't he require immersion? Mishum de Rabbi Yitzchak. And if you're going to say it's because of Rabbi Yitzchak, the Yomer Rabbi Yitzchak, because Rabbi Yitzchak says, Dvar Torah, that on a Doraisa level, Rubo Makbid Olav Chotzitz, you have to have a majority, let's say you have some kind of separation, something that's a chatzitza in the mikvah, it has to cover the majority, and it has to be something that the person is concerned about, is strict about. In that case, it's Chotzitz. But Rubo She'eno Makbid Olav, but if it's covering the majority, but it's not something that he's makbid about, Eno Chotzitz, it's not a chatzitza. And as Rashi over here says, V'achalo kapid by chatzitza. Here the fetus doesn't care about the chatzitza. Hayvalda de revisehu. This is where the fetus is growing up. V'afagav damar hasam gozru al rubo shein makbid. Now, even though there's a gzeira midrabanan on this kind of a situation that it is a chatzitza, hachukim na doraisa. Maybe over here we go back to the doraisa halacha, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis.